of ground to cover, so we're going to give as much time as possible. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Connie Cook. I am this year's program chair for the League of Women Voters Roseville area. And I welcome you all tonight. Just for those of you who may not know, our league represents actually 5 communities: Little Canada, I should go in alphabetical order: Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Little Canada, Maplewood, and Roseville. The League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. It is open to both men and women. Our mission is to encourage informed and active participation in government and influence public policy through education and advocacy. We have, even this spring, still a lot of very interesting programs coming up. I am not going to go through them all because we've got a long agenda on them tonight, but I encourage you to either go to our website, our Facebook page, or if you're a member, check our voter, and all the opportunities will be in there. I do want to mention one of them though, and it's on March 19th. It is called Behind Closed Doors, Parting the Curtain on Elder Abuse. Elder abuse is a big topic right now. There's a lot of push for legislation, a lot of advocacy going in the state capitol. So whether you've dealt with this yourself or are anticipating working with someone in, say, a nursing home situation or what, this would be really a valuable meeting to come to. Where 2 speakers are Christine Sundberg, who is president of Elder Voice Family Advocates, and Jacqueline Heron, who is an author and also an advocate. They're going to share their personal stories, which are very, very interesting. A family member who has suffered elder abuse. They will also talk about what's happening in the Minnesota legislature this year and recommendations that they have for that legislation. So it is at 6:30 to 8 o'clock at the Roseville Library Community Room on March 19th. So with that, I would like to introduce Karen Schaefer. For those of you who don't know her, Karen is a league member, but she is also president of the Council of Metropolitan Area Leagues of Women Voters. And she has been the mover and shaker in putting this study together that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Thanks, Bonnie. Is this mic working pretty good for everybody?
No.
Good. Too close?
No, that's good.
That's good?
That's good.
All right. If I stray. I'm very honored to be speaking in front of the League of Women Voters of Roseville area. I know many of you, and I have many fond memories of all the things we've done together over the years, and I hope there's some members of the public here as well. I am representing the Council of Metropolitan Area Leagues. It's a really awful name. I'm going to try to next year get a rebranding. Got to be a little more modern. If you don't know what this organization is, it's just like any other League of Women Voters chapter. We're nonpartisan, political. We do education and research, and then we do advocacy based upon positions. It's just that our focus is only on regional issues, not local issues, not state issues. We're just right in that sweet spot in the middle. And we were created in 1962, 5 years before the Metropolitan Council. So we were there first. So who are the members of CMAL? Every member of every league chapter in the metro area, once you pay your dues to your local chapter, you're automatically a member of CMAL. So we are really big. I think we have 1,000 members. So, in January of this year, January 2019, our organization completed a 5-month study on the very, very narrow question of how should the Metropolitan Council be governed. A couple of things to note. It's a 5-month study. Most league studies are 1 year or 2 year. We did it in 5 months, and I assure you, I will never do that again. You know, you have to learn, live and learn. And we met like crazy people every week for 4 months, basically. And we had a lot of people helping, but it was quite a project. So we published our report, and it's on the League of Women Voters in Minnesota website under CMAL. And I commend you to read it if you're, you know, a little geeky, a little nerdy about metropolitan governance. It has a it has the current position, our position on Metropolitan Council. There are a few copies floating around tonight. We've been developing this position off and on for, you know, 50+ years. The report includes the results of our research, which we did reading and interviewing, big time, bigly, as they say. The report includes 10 consensus questions, and I'll speak a little more on that. It has an excellent bibliography, and then in the back it has the results of a project, a special kind of co-project where we tried to interview as many city managers and local elected officials as we could. In other words, when we're studying metropolitan governance, you know, we talked to the experts and we read all the stuff in the papers, but then get the perspective of actual people in the cities and the counties who deal with the Metropolitan Council as part of their jobs. And it was extremely insightful. If the project had been more than 5 months, we could have, of course, interviewed many more people. But, you know, the 5 months were up, and there you be. Sherry Hood, our local president, and Bonnie Cook, our program director, they participated in that process and interviewed Pat Trudgeon from the city of Roseville. So we had lots of local league members all over the metro area conducting these interviews, and you can, you know, read the results in the report. So the question would be, why did we pick this particular topic? And the reason is, past maybe, I don't know, maybe you can help me remember, at least through starting in 2014, but gathering steam in 15 and 16 and 17 and 18. If you read local papers, even occasionally, you could see that this issue of how the council should be governed became an important topic for local elected officials. Lots and lots of op-eds all over the paper. The Pioneer Press, the Star Tribune, everywhere. People had ideas. It should be changed. It should be kept the same. And, so there's a lot of debate. The Citizens League did a 2-year study of the Metropolitan Council in 2015 and 16. And of course they do, you know, top drawer kind of work. And they addressed this question in their way of how should the Metropolitan Council be governed. And then the coup de grace was that in the 2018 session, there was a bill that passed the House and the Senate and wandered its way right over to the governor's desk that would have completely changed the way the Metropolitan Council is run. Major, major change. And Governor Dayton took a peek at that and he said, nah, and he vetoed it. But it showed that there were a lot of people in both houses who thought that this new way would be a good thing. The main feature is it would still be an appointed entity. It'd still be appointments, not direct election, but the identity of the people to be appointed would have been completely different. It would have been people already holding local, county, or municipal office. And that's who would be peopling the new Metropolitan Council, plus a few transportation officials from MnDOT. This particular question, our organization, CMAL, we have never examined that question. It's just sort of been a given over the years. The people who are appointed are not current office holders. So we thought, well, we better study that. And we put the question to our members, all 1,000, and to see if there's a consensus on that, and other questions that have come up about how it's governed. So tonight we're going to do two things. I'm going to give you a kind of super brief overview of the report. It's real, you know, gnarly and detailed, so we can't just go on and on and on. And as I'm doing that, I'd be happy to take questions. It's more fun if you get to ask questions right during the midstream. And then after that, we're going to actually have a formal consensus process. For members of the league, if you're a member, dues paid, card carrying, name tag wearing member, then we decided we were going to use a paper. It's a ballot, but it's not like an election. It's not meant to be secret. We just thought maybe if people could write their answers down and then hand the ballots in to me at the end, I will place them into the giant CMAL hopper, because there's meetings like this all over the metro area, in all the 19 chapters, and we'll just see what do our members think about these questions. Is there a consensus? So part one, you know, talking head. Part two, consensus. And when we do consensus, we try to come together, and it would be appropriate for people, if you have opinions or thoughts and you would like to, you know, get up and say, well, we should answer this question this way and the other question that way, because there's no correct answer. It's really trying to take the pulse of the members. So you can see our name, CMAL. Some people call it CMAL, but in Spanish, that means yes, bad. So, I don't do that. I don't do it. I call it CMAL. Bonnie, do we want to hand out these ballots to the members? And then you can see your questions and noodle about them as we go through. Okay, yes.
Can non-members at least look at it if not submit it?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Sure, let's do it this way. I have got two colors, so why don't I give, do you want to take, or one of you, use the white ones if you're not a member, and just, and then it'll be easier for us to pick them up later. Okay. Purples are for members. Purples are for members, yes. And I don't always recognize members, so please thank you. Oh, I've seen your name on the list, but I've never been able to. I am? Yeah.
This is my first one yet. This is Kelly. A year ago, I know. Something like that. I didn't think about it. Looking at numbers,
Is everybody all well positioned? So the consensus process. Is this better too? Is this mic working good?
I think
Okay.
try to do.
So the consensus process, it's not like an election, you know, where if you win by one vote, you win. It's more a sense of the group. So in the League of Women Voters, first you select an issue, we did that. We studied it, yeah, we did that. Formulating a position, that's what we're doing now. We're trying to formulate what we think about the issues. And then, if there is a consensus, we will use it to lobby, because there's likely to be more bills in the legislature. So we selected, we decided to update the 2001 position on Met Council governance. Why did we do that? Well, I went over that before, just a hot topic, everybody's interested in it. And honestly, people have been interested in these questions ever since 1967 when they invented the Metropolitan Council. These issues come up, they come and they go, and they come and they go, and it's just, apparently there's, there's no perfect solution. Otherwise, we'd have found it by this time. Okay, so consensus is a group discussion. So once we get to that part, I'm going to expect some discussion because it would be interesting to hear if people have ideas. And the consensus reached by members is the overall sense of the group as expressed through the exchange of ideas and opinions, and then the tallies that we'll be collecting. So, Metropolitan Council, established in 1967, political subdivision of the state of Minnesota for regional planning and economic development for the metro area. So it includes the 7 counties, but not Northfield and not Hanover and not St. Michael. A couple of little cities are excluded, otherwise it's the 7 counties. It was established in 1967 as a planning organization. It did just planning, didn't operate anything. And over the years, the legislature has added functions to it, planning this and planning that. And the big change came in 1994 when they decided that besides being a planning agency, it would be a doing or an operating agency. From the period of 67 to 94, the transit system had been run by the Metropolitan Transit Commission. It was a separate group, separate board, separate entity. The sewer system, run by the Metropolitan Waste Control Commission, a separate board with separate people and separate duties and separate powers. And then there was the Regional Transit Board, and they were supposed to do intermediate transportation planning. So they were also planning. So there were 4 entities until 1994. And the legislature said, okay, we're done with that. We're going to collapse everything into one. Adios MTC, adios the Waste Control Commission, adios to the RTB. We're going to make that Metropolitan Council is just going to do it all. And I don't know if any of you remember the occasion, one of the famous incidents that happened. It was in early 90s, and I think it might have even been in winter, but you'll remember, you're familiar with Metro Mobility. We see their vehicles all around. Well, the Metro Mo of the early 90s, one day they just stopped working. They didn't pick anybody up. They left everybody in the lurch. And Governor Carlson, I think, called out the National Guard. You know, I mean, we had disabled people without transportation. It was a big to-do. And there were other issues too, but the question came, who are you going to blame for that? Whose fault was that, golly? Because here's the system of government we have. We have the Metropolitan Council, appointed by the governor. Then you had the Metropolitan Transit Commission, appointed by the Metropolitan Council. There were 8, instead of 16. And then you had the Metropolitan Transit Commission. They had a contract with a private contractor to run the Metro Mobility System. So, you know, who's at fault? You know, it was kind of the thought was, all right, we need to get rid of all these layers. So when something good happens, you know who to criticize, and when something good happens, you know who to give the praise to. So that was the biggest change in the history of the Metropolitan Council. The other thing that has happened, and I've heard people say this off and on, oh, that Metropolitan Council, oh my gosh, mission creep. They just keep doing more and more and more. Why are they doing this and doing that? Everything they do is given to them by the legislature. So if you don't like what they're working on, you think they shouldn't have any business in this or that topic, your beef is with the legislature. And I assure you that there are many, many, many statutes that give the Metropolitan Council authority. I mean, there's a whole book. It's big, big league. And so they do a lot because a lot has been entrusted to them. So, and you might be curious to know that they used to do other things that they don't do anymore. For example, they used to have, they used to be responsible for solid waste in the metro area. They used to be responsible for arts grants in the metro area. They used to have a department on aging. They used to do hospital certificates of need. They don't do any of that now. So in some sense, so all those other functions have moved away to other places, other agencies. So they are in some ways narrower than they used to be. I think some people would be surprised.
Karen, how many employees are there approximately?
There are approximately 4,400. Most of them are the transit people, every bus driver, LRT driver, maintenance man, and sewer workers. That's about 4,000. So, the board appointed by the governor, 16 members, each represent their district. This Roseville is in District 10. The term of the chair and the board are coterminous with the governor. So this is what Tim Walz is doing. He's got 16 chairs and a chair, and he can fill them all. And they'll serve for 4 years. And he can get rid of them at will. Just adios amigo, thanks for your service, but we need somebody new in your chair. It used to be that the governor could appoint only half, because the terms were staggered. But now, starting in 1994, they're all coterminous, so there's a whole new slate coming in. And if you've been reading, the nominating committee has proposed 3 names from each of the 16 districts. And as you know, Nora Slawick, a League of Women Voters member, is now the chair. So what do? Well, they do the sewage treatment, 8 treatment plants, 600 miles of interceptors. Those are the really, really, really big pipes. They own and operate with their own employees the transit system, which is the regular route bus, the the bus rapid transit, the both kinds, the kind on the highway and the kind on the arterial streets. So the highway kind is the one they have on Cedar Avenue. It's got its own lane, as though it were a train. But the A line, of course, that runs up and down Snelling between Rosedale and 46th Street, 48th Street in Minneapolis, that runs on the street, but it's got, doesn't stop at every corner. It stops at stations. They run the LRT, the green line and the blue line, the commuter rail, that is from Big Lake down to the transit station. They do Metro Mobility and Transit Link, which is a service where there's no regular bus. So these are their kind of their major areas. Long-range planning, which they've been doing since 1967. Land use planning. All of our cities had to have their comp plans in by December 31st of last year. Metropolitan Council drives that bus. Your city comp plan has to comport with Metropolitan Council policies to get approved. And you've got to have an approved plan so you can continue to exercise your zoning and other regulatory authority. They do the transportation, not the highways, but everything else. The regional park system. They don't own and operate any parks, but they organize it and they have a plan, and the actual work of buying parkland, building park facilities, running park facilities belongs to 10 other units of government. Now we're talking about the regional parks, not the city parks, not the state parks, but things like Como, things like Murphy Hammerhand, things like the regional parks. And then they have wastewater and water. They do work in water supply. They manage that to some extent. And then they have a big housing program there, a big HRA. So this is the chart. Now, if you really are curious about things that the Metropolitan Council does, specific programs, I do commend you to their website. Even if you don't like the Metropolitan Council or whatever, if you want to know what they do, they have a very easily navigable website. If I can navigate it with ease, it's got to be really, really good. And so you can see they have regional growth, local planning, parks and open space, HRA. That's mainly the program of federal vouchers. Income qualified people get a voucher, and then the federal government, they find a landlord who will take them in and rent to them, and then that voucher is worth money. So that people of modest means, low income people, this is not what we call affordable housing, this is low income housing. This is, Met Council does it for maybe 100 cities. Like Roseville doesn't have its own HRA. People who live in Roseville go to the Met Council to apply for a voucher. You have environmental services, that is operating the sewers. And I always thought that all the sewage treatment plants were owned by the Metropolitan Council. Well, don't be me. There's still some owned by cities. And they're buying one of them now. I forget where it is, somewhere out in the western Hennepin. And there's a little quote from the city manager there saying, yeah, we've been talking to the Metropolitan Council for 30 years. And it's going to happen. Because, before the Met Council, all the sewage treatment plants were owned by cities. And you can see how that would be a problem eventually. All these septic systems were breaking down, and the cities were not going to be able to meet the new standards for discharge into surface water. But there's still one out there. I was just amazed. So they bought up all the sewage treatment plants, and some of them they closed down, and some of them they still operate. And transportation, Metro Transit, Metro Mode, Transit Link, and regional planning. All right, this is really the nerdy part. So you don't need, it's deep in the weeds. If you don't have scuba, a snorkel will do. And the only reason we went into this amount of detail was this was the heart and soul of that legislation that Governor Dayton vetoed. So we go, well, all right, it's kind of picayune in some ways. One of all the statutes, there is a statute in the books that says the Metropolitan Council is what we call the MPO, which means Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so that's fine. An MPO, the federal government has said, and this came up, started in the 70s, the federal government in the transportation function said, if a regional area would like federal transportation dollars for highway and bridge projects, which of course they do, you have to have in your area an MPO. And the MPO is like the gatekeeper. It isn't like the gatekeeper, it is the gatekeeper. And it's meant to give the federal government confidence that if they fork over, many millions to some region for a project, they want to make sure that it's going to get built, that the region, everybody's on board for it. So you don't have failed projects. So there's, right now today, there's 400 of these MPOs all across the country. And they have the duty of prioritizing transportation projects. Project 1, Project 2, and of course, if you're Project 10, you're kind of down on the list and your project's not going to get funded that year. It's all about choices. But here's the thing. The federal government not only said you have to have an MPO, but you have to have local elected officials on it. So here we are in Minnesota. We have our MPO, the Metropolitan Council. And I assure you, there is not a single elected official on it. Not one. Because under Minnesota law today, you can't do it. Now that bill from last time around, that would have changed everything, but we don't have that bill. That was just a bill, and it was vetoed. So the question is, how can we be an MPO? How can the Metropolitan Council be this safeguard, this gatekeeper for all these precious federal transportation dollars if there's not any elected officials on it? Pardon?
It was grandfathered in?
It was in that sense, but what they did was, they did grandfather it in, but on the condition that they have an advisory committee. So there is another group up there called the TAB. So the MPO and the TAB, it's just a bunch of groups. The TAB is called the Transportation Advisory Board. And guess who's on that board? Well, they're just a bunch of elected officials. And their job, they're county officials and city officials. Their job is to recommend to the Metropolitan Council the priorities for the transportation funding. There is no other MPO in the US of A like that. We're the only one. So the budget, $1.059 billion with a B. A lot of that is pass-through money. For example, all the federal money that Section 8 voucher holders get, that goes through. There's a lot of transportation money from the legislature. They have 4,400 employees, and the regional administrator is the CEO. I don't know who the new CEO is. I forgot, but Nora Slawick has her own, CEO, somebody whose job it is to run basically an organization of 4,400 employees. So in 1967, there were 14 districts, so there were 14 people on the Metropolitan Council and a chair. Now there's 16. And in 1967, that meant each district had 129,000 people. Today, each district has 192,000. So this is a factoid, which goes to the question of direct election. If you're going to have a 16-member council, and if they're going to be directly elected, then each one has to face a population of 192,000. Compare that to a state Senate district, 84,000. So that's, okay, and here's the map. It's kind of tiny. It shows up real good on the website. Okay. Well, that's kind of all our PowerPoint had on the background. I wanted just to go back. Oops. The current structure, so it's 16 members. The districts are basically equal population. They're redistricted every 10 years, just like everything else. So if they're not elected, so I did this presentation to be Dinah Lee Glassbeck, and the first question I gave was, why didn't they make it elected in 1967 when they started? What were they thinking to have an appointed board? And of course I hadn't completely done my homework, and so I wasn't completely sure. I thought I knew, but it turns out that in 1967, when they invented the Metropolitan Council, there were competing bills. There were several bills of what it should look like. My organization, CMAL, we didn't lobby on those bills because our position didn't really allow us to distinguish. One was a powerful operating agency run by elected officials. So members of the Met Council would be elected. And then you have to have districts of equal population on the principle of, one person, one vote. Then there was another bill of a weaker, it's called the weak council model. It was only a planning organization, and it would be run by a bunch of appointed people. So what they did was, they basically adopted the weak model, but they came up with these population districts of equal population. So it's all set up for election, but there aren't any elections. It's just kind of a quirky thing. Okay, so we can launch ourselves into these consensus questions. Yes, question.
One thing I don't have a good sense of is what is the time expectation for a Met Council member? Is this like a board of directors where you meet once a month, you set some policy decisions, and then you go off to your other jobs? Or, because all this talk about having elected officials who have other jobs come in and be on the Met Council as one of the options, as well, these people often, if you're a suburban mayor, you have another job and you're a suburban mayor. It's not a full-time job. If you want a third job, you're on the Met Council too? No, I mean, how's that going to work?
So the question goes to the, how much time does it really take to be a Metropolitan Council member? Can you waltz in once a month, look at the agenda, pass ayes and nays, blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't really work that way. They meet twice a month, They all sit on committees, in committee meetings, and public hearings. And if you talk to local elected officials in the districts, the city people and the county people, they expect Metropolitan Council members to be in touch with them. So, in this District 10, that means our Met Council person would have to be in touch with Blaine, Circle Pines, Lexington, Arden Hills, Falcon Heights, Lauderdale, Mounds View, New Brighton, North Oaks, Roseville, and Shoreview, and Spring Lake Park. Well, you know, it's a question then, how much time would it take for you to keep in touch with those people? And so this was a consideration. Actually, if you look at the report and you look at the interviews that league members did with city people, the city managers, the city planners, the city elected officials, they thought that the most important qualification to be a Met Council member was to have enough time for it. Really, they were, I don't think there was a single one who said, yeah, you should put local elected officials on there. They said, no. That's their opinion. That was very interesting, but it goes to the question of time. Because the issues Met Council deals with, I mean, arguably, they're quite complicated. So, yes?
How do they get on the committee that's called TAB? The advisory people, are they appointed also?
Oh, how does a local elected official get on TAB? Basically, the cities decide through an organization called the Association of Metropolitan Municipalities. It's like a trade group of cities. Most cities in the metro area are members. It's a membership organization. And they get to pick. So the city people who want to be on the tab go to the Association of Metro Municipalities. They usually call themselves, they've successfully rebranded themselves to be called Metro Cities. Not some geeky name like Association of Metropolitan Municipalities. And then on the county side, the District 10 of the Association of Minnesota Counties, they pick the county people. So if you're a county commissioner and you want to be on the tab, you go to the county organization. Well, that's how that happens. And I do believe that Metro Cities and the Association of Minnesota Counties, they like having that ability to make those appointments. But that's how you get on it.
Karen, what, I forgot what I was going to say. Does each district have their own, have their own elected official to tab?
No, there are
those metropolitan cities?
There's, oh, now you're pressing me here on my knowledge. How many people are on tab? There's 33. And exactly half plus one are elected officials. So it's 17, I think. So it's like 7 county commissioners and maybe 16 cities. You know, so it's a select group. The people who want to be on the tab, they're transportation passionate.
So each county has their own, obviously their own commission, and each county is represented by one commissioner?
Yes.
Okay.
And they sort of speak for counties as a whole. The other people on the tab there's some people appointed by the Metropolitan Council, and there's some state transportation officials. But by one, it's dominated by local elected officials. Alrighty, so, Norm, yes.
Karen, what was the impetus and what were the issues that led to those votes in the House and Senate? What were some issues that made those legislators feel that it should be elected rather than appointed?
Well, now that's, the question here is, what was the impetus behind what I call the vetoed bill from last session? What were legislators thinking? In some ways, I don't know. I do know that the impetus was led by commissioners from Dakota County, Scott County, Carver County, and Washington County, and they have actually formed an organization and hired a lobbyist to do this. I think if you asked them, they would say the Metropolitan Council doesn't pay enough attention to local elected officials. They're just out there, they do their things, and they don't really understand our needs, they don't understand us, they don't listen to us. And so we think that we would put elected people, like a county commissioner and 2 from Hamilton, that would be better because they have better knowledge of local affairs or local whatever. And there's probably other stuff behind the scenes too. Some of those people active in that movement are not big fans of the Metropolitan Council, no matter who's on it. Okay. So as we go along, mark up your ballot as you wish, and we'll speak on these. So this is our first question. Members of the council, they should be citizens residing in the district who are not local elected officials. That's what we have now. That's what we've got right now. Or another option is direct election. These people should run for office. Or the idea of the vetoed bill. People who are already elected to a local unit should be eligible to be appointed to serve on the Metropolitan Council. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak on that. Florence was intimating a little bit that local elected officials might not have enough time. June.
I was just going to point out that you have the things listed in a slightly different order than the ABC on the questionnaire, in case somebody's...
There is a little teeny weeny disconnect between the PowerPoint and the forms. I tell you, New Year's Eve was a struggle, and we had no staff. We were just the league ladies, So,
I'm only pointing it out for clarification.
yes, it's a good clarification, so don't, I think substantively, I think they should be pretty much syncing, but there's a little disconnect on the formatting. I agree.
Are we open for a little bit of comment?
Sure.
Okay, so I guess what I'm thinking is most people, or maybe I'm only speaking for myself, know very little about the Metropolitan Council because we aren't involved in any way, we aren't involved in any elections for people that are on it. And so one could think that if we had to vote for people that were on it, perhaps we'd pay a little bit more attention to what the responsibilities of it are. But at the same time, I will say we vote for judges, and most of us don't have much knowledge of the judges we vote for. So it's sort of the 2 sides of the coin, I guess.
Yes. Maybe.
Well, my first term in the Minnesota House was 93, 94, which is when all of the stuff that Karen went through, the big changes happened. And one of the big changes that was proposed that did not happen was to have the Met Council representatives be elected. And it didn't pass. The main reason was just because the districts would be so big. So if there was going to be elected people, then the feeling was the legislature had to provide money so that they could not have to raise money for that obscure an office, but yet such a big area. And the price tag for that is what tanked it.
So we can mosey on to the next question. Now this one says, if they are appointed, like if we keep the current appointment system, who should make the appointments? One is the governor, that's today's situation. 2, local elected officials. What if they got to pick the one person from their district? Or maybe there should be a mix. So this question is trying to ask the members, would this be a suitable way of getting local elected officials more involved? Having them, pick. They pick already the tab. Yep, Marianne.
There's a nominating committee, isn't there, that reports to the governor as to who could serve on the council?
Yes, at present there is a nominating committee in the statute. It consists of 7 people and there are local elected officials on it. Governor Walz just decided to increase it to 12. I guess he wanted to hear a few more voices. And so there are local elected officials on the nominating committee that presents the governor with a slate.
Do they carry over people generally, or do they all change with new governors?
On the nominating committee?
No, on the council.
Now Governor Dayton kept one of Governor Pawlenty's people. Of the 16, I think he kept one, Wendy Wolf from Dakota County, but by right, they can just have 16 new faces. So the next question is, the chair of the Metropolitan Council. So the options that we came up with were the governor picks the chair, current law. 2, local elected officials could somehow be tapped to pick the chair in some process or other. Or the Metropolitan Council members, they could elect, let's assume there were 17, they could elect who they want, which seems like an intriguing idea, but on our study committee, we had a former member of the Metropolitan Council on our committee, Susan Anderson she's from up there in Anoka County, and she said, she chortled with this idea. She said, well, it sounds like a good idea on paper, but she said, when you're appointed to the Metropolitan Council and you go to your first meeting, you have never in your life met any of those people. Now, she's active in her area, she's on the school board, she was a connected official, she knew lots of people, but she didn't know people from Scott County. And so that was kind of, I thought, an interesting insight, so she just sort of laughed. But, it's a concept. It's a concept. Yes?
Regrettably, I did not read the report. Does the report have the pros and cons of each of these choices?
Yes.
Yeah. So I missed out on that.
Yeah, we did. We tried to, be objective. That is, there's no correct answer. There's no key hidden around. Yes. Yes.
Is politics in any form dangerous? Meaning, if you have a bunch of Republicans, they could pick their people, or a bunch of Democrats, they could promote or appoint. Is that a concern, or just totally not?
Well, I would think, just based upon observation, typically the governors who make these appointments, they're political people, and they frequently pick kindred spirits. I mean, there's a reason when Governor Pawlenty was governor, they didn't work on light rail because he didn't like it. That's where the influence comes in.
Well, they used to have staggered terms, and then they quit doing that, and I don't understand why that would be. It would make sense But you had one governor who succeeded another governor before him, and they had very opposing views. At least you have people from the previous administration still there, and also you would have members of the Metropolitan Council who have experience.
Yes, and I heard Wendy Wolf speak on that. She's the one Paulenti appointee who Governor Dayton kept. I don't know anything about her in particular, but I heard her speak once at a venue, and she said, when Tim Paulenti had all those new people in, 15 out of 6, or Governor Dayton came in and had all those new people, she was the only holdover. And, I think it was a stressful thing for her, because she's the only one who knew anything. When I did work at the Metropolitan Council in the 80s before this change was made, and so when the new governor came in, he got to appoint 8. And then he had, and then 2 years later, the next set would come up. So you could keep some of those people, and I saw governors of both parties keep people on, if they were talented, former legislators or whatnot. But yeah, they used to have staggered terms, got rid of that in '94, now it's just, and that was, the accountability, So when Metro fails again, we're going to look for the governor, because he appointed those people. Other questions? Okay. 4, if they're appointed, which we're assuming here, should they be coterminous with the governor, like they are now? Or, and then the question, it also is even finer grain. Should they serve at the pleasure of the governor, or should they have a fixed term? The pleasure means when the governor calls and says bye-bye, you are bye-bye. Otherwise, you just fill out your term and you only can get thrown off if you, move away or do something, hideous. But the governor can't yank you off the Metropolitan Council for a vote you took. So it's a kind of a combo question. Or should they have fixed staggered terms like we had before 1994, removable only for cause? It's kind of a lot to noodle about.
Karen, what constitutes cause?
I didn't do too much reading that. It would be something substantial, such as some kind of misconduct or
Not disagreeing with the whole thing?
not just, didn't vote right. That's serving at the pleasure, but it could be moving away and never attending the meetings, something like that, something very substantial, but not for failing to vote the way the governor wanted the vote to come. Okay, next, oops, did I skip 2?
Karen, one other question about that. So now, do they serve at the pleasure of the governor?
They do,
Okay.
they do.
Has anyone ever been yanked?
I have not read of anybody being yanked. But they know full well if they don't vote like them. They will be. That's the assumption. 5, if they were directly elected, should their terms be not staggered? That is, they all come in at one time, or should they be staggered? If you want to make any notes, on your ballot or any comments, just feel free to do that. And number 6 goes to this question of qualifications, and we had an interesting discussion in our committee, and all these are interesting qualifications, business experience, professionals, commitment to regional perspective, knowledge of regional issues, demographic diversity, ability to meet time requirements, previous experience as a local elected official or elected official of any kind. was pointed out to us by some of the people we interviewed, if you have too many qualifications, your pool of appointees shrinks. It'd be great to have all these things. So at the Edina group, they took the position that this is a good list, and the governor should maybe try to have some of these types of people on the council. But the only thing in the statute now, I think, is knowledge of urban affairs and demographic diversity. But, you know, what is that? In Metropolitan Council, 16 people, you know, who represents, say, District 10, the one we're in right now? Well, I mean, it's a majority white group. So, you know, it's not clear on what people want. I will say that over the years, the governors typically will appoint one or two members of minority communities, I guess, as a nod.
So when it says demographic diversity, I wasn't thinking that meant diversity. I was thinking that meant spread out in the geographical area, but it actually means diversity?
I think that's what they meant, because there's one from each of the 16 districts. And as I mentioned, the local people that we interviewed, the mayors and planning directors and all that, they just said the only thing they cared about was time. And everything else was sort of come out in the wash. Because, you know, if you look at the people who are appointed, frequently they are from business or professions, or sometimes retired legislators get in there and whatnot.
But I think the one thing that stands out is that commitment to the regional perspective, the big picture. And there are many elected officials that tend to see, you know, their own constituency. But this has got to be some sort of a commitment to the big.
I think the current, so what she's saying is that it's more important than many things that you have this commitment to the regional perspective. That's a big part of the training that new members get. And it's one of the criticisms for putting local elected people, because, you know, I did a little workshop in January on this topic, and, you know, I don't know who the mayor of Blaine is. I'm sure this is a great person. Knows Blaine like the back of his hand. He's probably talked to every Blaine resident, you know, and he knows everything about it. And of course, Blaine is a, you know, a thriving community. But I mean, he doesn't know anything about sewage treatment plants. He doesn't know anything about, you know, light rail, except what he reads in the paper. So the argument is that the local officials, they're really, really in the know about their locality. And when you're on the Metropolitan Council, you've got the 7 counties. That's your area that you're supposed to be concerned about. I think the statute now just says knowledge of urban affairs, which, you know, might be a kindred thing. But I do know it's a big part of their training that they get when they're newly appointed. Number 7, okay, a little bit more on the appointment process. If they are appointed by the governor, what should the nominating committee be? Now it's 7 members, although Governor Walz just said, well, yeah, I've got 5 more. Or it should be expanded, the statute should be revised to expand it to 13, so I don't know where 13 came from. That came from, I think, metro cities or something like that, but make it bigger.
7 members, has it always been 7 members?
It has always been 7, I'm pretty sure.
The population has increased quite a bit in the metropolitan area.
Oh, yes, yes, the metropolitan population is much larger. I don't know where they got, I mean, I don't know enough about the history of it. Where'd they get 7? You know, it just seems like a...
7 counties.
All right. Well, it could be, but I mean, you know, the idea of 7 people, how would, that's not very many people to be studying the credentials of these applicants and recommending to the governor. It's just pretty petite. Yes, Florence?
Do people apply to be on this, or is it all up to the committee to sort of figure out